Good afternoon, everyone. We'll just wait for a few people to come on into our GoToWebinar session today. All right. See a couple more people coming in. Okay, let's get started. Welcome to the Where Are They Now? Alumni Reflections panel hosted by Equal Justice Works. My name is Linby Toombs, and I am the Director for Alumni Relations at Equal Justice Works. I am pleased to introduce to you 2012 fellow alum, Megan Kemp, who will serve as our moderator for today and facilitate the introductions of our alumni panelists. During her fellowship, Megan provided legal advocacy to domestic violence victims in Bexar County, Texas, to deter and reduce the growing number of violations of civil family law court orders through direct representation services and the development of a comprehensive community education program. After the completion of her fellowship in 2014, Megan joined the policy department within the Office of Chief Counsel for the Texas Health and Human Services Commission, focusing primarily on policy and legislative matters regarding women's health, family violence services, and Medicaid service delivery for children in state conservatorship. In 2020, Megan became Associate Director for the legal team providing support for the state-operated mental health facilities and community programs for mental health, behavioral health, and intellectual and developmental disabilities services. We are so excited to have Megan and all of our alumni panelists here today. So please join me in giving a warm virtual welcome to Megan and our panelists.
Thank you, Linby. I'm so excited to join our wonderful class of alums today to hear about their starts of their careers and where they are now. I'm going to ask everyone to go around and share what year your fellowship was, what you focused on, where you are now, and what organization you are with and your role in that organization. So I'm going to kick it off with Ericka.
Oh goodness, I was writing down. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Ericka Garcia. I am a class 09 EJW fellow. I provided holistic representation to foster kids with developmental disabilities. So I was everywhere from special education system, adoption, anything that my kids needed, I followed them to every system. I'm now the programs director at United Against Poverty, and I am based out of Orlando, Florida.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here. Aurora.
Yes, thanks for having me. I am a 1998-99 fellow. I think it's that far, but my fellowship focused on housing justice and eviction defense, pro bono program coordination work, and I am now in my basement. And I actually used to work for about 20 years at Columbia Legal Services, where my fellowship was, and am now doing consulting under Pop-Up Justice.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. Ahilan?
Yes, I'm a class of 2000, so also a dinosaur like Aurora. My fellowship was focused on representing detained immigrants seeking asylum in the New York and New Jersey area, and then also litigation to protect and expand their rights at the ACLU Immigrants' Rights Project back then. And then after that, I briefly left and for 2 years was a federal public defender, and then joined the ACLU in Southern California and was there for almost 15 years. And then just now in March, I left the ACLU and joined the faculty at UCLA Law School to work still on immigrants' rights related issues. And I'm in Los Angeles, in my house.
Incredible. Thank you so much for being here. Mary?
Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Bissell, and you guys have nothing on the dinosaur front because I am the ultimate dinosaur. In 1994, when we were still NAPL, not Equal Justice Works, and there were only 7 of us. And I think we had our retreat at, I don't know, just a very weird retreat center, but it was the beginning of something great. I do child welfare issues. My fellowship, we started the first legal services program in the country for grandparents and other relatives raising children. So have done a lot of work with kinship care and child welfare. And that has been the thread that has been kind of woven through several careers at this point, including I spent time on the Hill. I started out at the Legal Aid Society of DC, spent time on the Hill with former Senator Rockefeller on working on these issues as a lobbyist and counsel at the Children's Defense Fund. And then I took all of what my husband calls this professional ADHD, and now I have a consulting firm called ChildFocus, and we bring practice, policy, and philanthropy together to support children and families. Happy to be here.
Very awesome career. And Andrew.
Hey everyone, well, I have to say I am not only honored to be here, but a little intimidated because I'm a 2016 alum, and so all my co-panelists who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet are way ahead of me in terms of their accomplishments and so many great things that they have done. I can't wait to hear more about. But I graduated law school in 2014, worked at a small private law firm for 2 years, started my Elder Justice Fellowship, the first batch of AmeriCorps Elder Justice Fellows in 2016, worked on elder abuse at Iowa Legal Aid on their hotline for older Iowans and represented elder abuse victims. And now I am at the Iowa Attorney General's office in the Consumer Protection Division, where I investigate and prosecute consumer frauds. And so I look for all sorts of frauds, but I pay particular attention to any sort of consumer fraud that is targeting older Iowans. I have a particular interest in that, stemming from my fellowship and just the fact that it's a very good thing to do and a population that needs a lot of help. So I seek a lot of injunctive relief on behalf of the state of Iowa. I try to get penalties for people civil penalties against people who violate our Consumer Fraud Act and other such things. So I'm on the civil side of prosecuting consumer fraud.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for being here today. We're going to do about 35 minutes of Q&A from me to the group of you, and then our last 20 minutes we are going to open it up to general Q&A from the audience. So if you are listening today and you have a question you'd like to ask any of our panelists, there is a question chat box on the side of the webinar. If you want to just drop your questions in there, Lindsay and I will make sure we ask them as we get towards the end of our hour together. So thank you all for being here today. I know this last year has been an unusual transition in all of our careers to this virtual world. So my first question I wanted to ask everybody is that first transition we all had, getting out of our fellowships and into what we think of as kind of our first career jobs afterwards, what that transition was like for you, and any particular lessons you took from that you would like to impart to our audience today. So Aurora, I'm going to start with you for that question.
Yeah, I feel like I grew up with my fellowship because I had stayed after having done 2 years on developing an eviction defense program in South King County, which is just about, it's just south of Seattle, actually, in the Kemp Regional Justice Center. I really got lucky and had the opportunity to be recruited as the Assistant Deputy Director at Columbia Legal Services. The organization actually has had a leadership development program, and that was essentially, it felt like a bit of an apprenticeship. And so once I got into that track, I was on track to become essentially the deputy director and then become the executive director. It was never like sort of like you will be this, but the longer I stayed, which kept on feeling like a fellowship in my mind, the longer I stayed. And so I grew up there from essentially being a fellow and went right into program administration and leadership with the opportunity to do general counsel work and some special projects for a statewide non-LSC funded program. And so I learned a lot. And one of the things about the, just general, how did I kind of prepare for or deal with the changes from fellowship days to then, a regular job. It was a surprise. It was a surprise because I thought that it was just going to be a 2-year gig. And yet I really enjoyed my time with the people. I enjoyed my time with the mission driven work and the kind of work that I was able to do with clients and look at both the individual level casework as well as the systemic work that that Columbia does today. And so I had to I was just open. And being open, I never expected to actually have a fellowship, never expected to do eviction defense work, which brought me into court every day in the people's court, and found that just being open and always surprised actually kind of gave me a lot of lessons learned within that career path. So I'll stop there for now, though.
It's a great starting point. Ahilan, I know you talked about doing your ACLU work and public defender and now academia. Any words of wisdom for those transitions out of your fellowship?
Yeah, I mean, definitely that first transition was scary. I could have stayed at the ACLU, and I knew it was a great organization. I was really enjoying it and learning so much. But I also thought that it might be good to try to get into a different environment. And I also, there were personal reasons for it also. It was relationship related to some extent. And also I was I thought that if I left, I might be able to kind of run more of my own stuff. And that was something I remember a lot of my colleagues, EJW, NAPLE fellows, I'm one of the last NAPLE classes, I think. Around the same time we were discussing this issue of how do you kind of get more responsibility if you're working in a larger organization. So in retrospect, I'm really glad that I did that. I went to the federal public defenders and got trained up and started just getting my own cases. That's the way it works in legal services world, as many of you know. And I was the person in charge. After 2 years, I think I realized that, and both were great jobs, but I think I realized that the ACLU was probably the better fit for me personally. And so I went back. But I think I was really glad that I did it because, it was sort of a chance to branch out a little bit and do something different. But it was definitely scary. Both of those first ones were scary. And I remember thinking of advice. Someone told me at the time, like, I know you think like your personal path is so different and unique, and it's like, oh, but the chances are your first job, probably you'll be there 2 or 3 years, and your second job, probably you'll be there 2 or 3 years. Maybe not. Maybe you'll be one of those people who stays in the same place forever. But so, don't be too kind of fraught about that move, because in law, you kind of don't settle in a lot of times until a little bit farther down the line. And that turned out to be true for me. And, that's where I was for, in the end, almost 20 years at the ACLU. I mean, minus the 2 years, the FED was almost 20 years at the ACLU. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll save the discussion about why the move to academia for the next round, so we can hear from other folks.
Thank you so much. Mary, I'd like to ask you the same thing. You talked us through several stages of your career as well. What would you, looking back on those transition parts, any wisdom you would share?
Yeah, no, I think I'm in my 7th life of 9 lives. I think one of the gifts of an Equal Justice Fellowship is really the opportunity to try on a bunch of different advocacy tools, right? So you go to law school and you think, I'm going to be a lawyer. And most people then realize that they went to law school to be an advocate, and law school is just one of the tools in that toolbox. So it's really hard to get through your Equal Justice Fellowship without talking to the media and learning how to lobby and, learning how to fundraise, which is, for the lucky few in the public interest world, it's part of our job descriptions. And so I think, one of the things that I really learned in my fellowship is which of those skills I really was good at, really liked, but also that was aligned with my personality. So I litigated a lot in my fellowship, and litigation, if I had continued that for a lifetime, probably would have made me quite insane, because that's not the way that I saw problems, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to find, what are you good at, what aligns with what your character and your values are, and then go from there. And I think that's the hardest thing about the transition, but if you can truly embrace it, is that once you leave law school and get a fellowship, which are very defined things, everything else is an incredibly organic pathway. And I teach an advocacy class at Georgetown for law students, and I've had 200 students over the past 10 years, and all of them have had incredibly organic, very different, very unpredictable paths. And I know not one of them that has been unhappy with those paths. So I would say embrace the unknown, and don't be afraid to let your career, just like your life, wander in directions that, there might be dead ends and you might readjust, but in the end, being open to those opportunities, as Aurora said, is really much more likely to get you to a place where you just are enjoying the journey.
Absolutely. Andrew, you have a unique experience having done private practice and then doing the fellowship. Looking back, what are some of your perspective points?
I would just echo exactly what Aurora and Ari have said, which is to be open to the unexpected. That is 100% what caused me to be in the position that I am at now, which I didn't know I wanted to be in. And 3 years later, it doesn't even seem like 3 years having been in the position, because it's so fun and gratifying, and it's my dream job I didn't know I wanted. And all I knew is that I wanted to be in public interest, and but needed a job, and I landed at a small firm, and it wasn't where I wanted to be. But and frankly, it's kind of funny, I didn't even know what Equal Justice Works was. I was applying to Iowa Legal Aid to be a staff attorney to transition into a public interest career, and someone else got hired for the staff attorney position, but they liked me for a potential elder justice fellowship because I had the training that was necessary to do litigation, because the hotline attorneys did not do litigation as much. And so, even though it wasn't what I wanted to do and what I had endeavored to do, it ended up being something that helped me to transition and gave me the skills I needed to be a viable candidate for that fellowship. And I didn't even have a specific interest. I was a little meandering, and I was sort of aimless on what exact sort of public interest law I would want to do. I didn't have a specific population or issue in mind as far as who I wanted to help or what I wanted to do. But elder justice is one of those things that's easy to get on board with, and it's pretty compelling. And so I figured, why not try it? And the worst thing is I serve my community and then I go do something else. And ended up really discovering a passion for that issue. And now, even though my current position as an assistant attorney general is very different, and that I represent a state, the government rather than individuals, I can still facilitate elder justice and take that passion and use it in a different way and keep growing. And again, didn't have any intention to get there. So I would just, again, echo just to embrace the unknown and be willing to try new things.
Absolutely. Ericka, I'd like to hear your recommendations to round out this question.
Sure. So I was at my host organization for 6 years and really had a strong pro bono support network that I really loved. And I won't lie, I got a little burnt out, and I know we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about how not to do that. But I was completely burnt out. And so I had been, an EJW fellow. I had been reviewing the applications as an alum, and I became the inaugural director of pro bono for the state of Florida at the Florida Bar Foundation, which was my funder. So then I got to do the really other cool piece, which was interview EJW applicants and actually bring them on board to Florida. So I got to do what I think of as like the trifecta, all three pieces of it. I was a fellow, I got to interview, be a funder, and then I also had the opportunity to review applications. It was really nice to call EJW and say, I can't review applications because I'm on the funder side now. So that was a lot of fun. And so I transitioned into that role because pro bono was the most important piece of the job of my advocacy work that I really loved. I loved, working with pro bono attorneys and getting them to take cases. And so as the director of pro bono, it just kind of happened. I created that position, and I thought, let me just try this, right? Staying open to the opportunities. And after I did that for a while, I opened my own consulting business and started to do this type of consulting across the country for a number of years. Well, not a number, about almost 3. And even before COVID hit, I thought to myself, why am I flying across the country to really amazing places and working with great people when I could do this stuff at home? And so I decided to actually transition out of the legal field into a programs field. So I'm at a nonprofit here in Orlando, Florida, supervising the workforce development team, a crisis stabilization team. We are a one-stop shop for folks in crisis here in Orlando, and we provide lots of different services to lift families out of poverty. And so I still get to use my attorney hat because I still get to negotiate contracts on behalf of my organization. I get to advocate for our families in different ways, and I get to tie them into legal services. So it's just about kind of figuring out, I don't want to say, we've talked about staying open, but also just navigating your own changes. Like this was a kind of change that I needed for my family. I needed to be home, and I didn't necessarily want to be in court all the time, but I still think my law degree is still pretty darn important and still hanging up on the wall, and I'm still licensed in my state. So it's just about figuring out what works for you and not really worrying about what people might necessarily think is the path.
I think that's the beauty of a law degree. It has so much versatility with how you can use it to serve and help other people. I'm hearing you all mention the values of the EJW Fellowship being very foundational to the trajectory you followed. I'd like to hear if there are any particular skills or particular facets of your fellowship experience that you carry with you when you're thinking of how you do your job, how you serve your community at this point. So I'll start with Andrew for this question.
One of the things that we had to do as a fellow was to track our cases, because we had a certain amount of cases we had to do, and we had to report with, with legal aid, we had to justify why we're doing the cases that we're doing. And, I am assistant attorney general. My boss is technically a politician. We are accountable to the public. And I make a lot of decisions on what cases, we can't do every case. There's a lot of bad stuff happening out there. There's a lot of people we want to help. And we have to, look at all the things that we could be doing and try to prioritize what we want to do. And so I just think that that whole process of sort of managing our cases and stuff like that transitions over to a role like mine, where you're accountable to the public and you need to justify why it is we're spending resources on this case rather than another. And so learning how to make that assessment, one, and two, and to justify it, two, and to make sure you're doing those cases where it's a true gut. In my opinion, I try to do the gut punch cases, the really good cases that, if the public is sitting next to me on the settlement table where I'm negotiating with an opposing party, would they be satisfied with what I'm trying to get for them? I think that perspective really helps, in a role like mine where you're in the government.
Absolutely. Ahilan, sorry, my dogs are with me today. Ahilan, when you talk about your role in academia, I know it's a more recent role, what EJW Fellowship values or skills do you see yourself currently using?
Well, here what I'm doing is co-directing a new Center for Immigration Law and Policy at UCLA. So it's definitely like a hybrid role between continue to do some amount of litigation and policy research work, and also doing some teaching, and both clinical and a little bit of other. So it's it's kind of a hodgepodgey kind of thing. But I think in general, those first few years I found incredibly important, informative for developing good habits and good practices, both I would say in terms of just pure litigation skills and being lawyering skills, how you talk to people, relating to your clients, and research and writing and all that stuff, and also how you manage your life. And we think about burnout and sustainability, really trying to put in place whatever the things are. That those first years, they were a little bit like the last 4 years, because the first year is 2000 to 2002. That means I was in New York in the middle of the my EJW fellowship when 9/11 happened. I was working with detained immigrants. So like suddenly there were hundreds of detained immigrants and we were trying to help those people, and just learning how to function in that and not feel like the sky was falling. I mean, the sky was falling, but trying to figure out how to manage and survive that, and do productive work in that environment. It was really useful in the Trump era, when for immigrants' rights people, it was very much a similar kind of climate all over again. So I think those first few years were extremely important, and I actually think that the parallel peer networks that we created in that time, a lot of those people are still in the immigrants. People from my class before me and class after me are still in the public interest immigrants' rights world doing the same things, and also in academia, in immigrants' rights related academia. And a lot of those kind of peer relationship and support networks that we set up ended up being incredibly important for 20 years later. Some of the same people actually now, so yeah, I think those first few years were really, really important in a whole number of ways.
Very formative. Ericka, you hit on such a highlight of serving in those 3 different capacities that all contribute to public service. What are some of the core skills or values from your fellowship you feel like you still carry with you?
So definitely the two biggest ones. I know this is going to sound really weird, but I loved the data collection piece. I loved, like, just from day one, being told, you need to count this and you need to count this, and you're going to report it to your funders. And it's such a great foundation, because guess what? After that fellowship was done, I was grant hunting, right? I was hunting for more funding for my position, and I was able to get that funding because I had such great data about how I had changed lives of the children that I worked with, and how we had created both, I had done direct representation, and how all the systemic changes that we had made. And so I was always fully grant funded, not only myself, but my team. I had a social worker on my team, I had a legal assistant, and I just always captured the data and was able to tell the story. And I think that EJW really sets the foundation for wanting and having to do that from day one. And the other piece was, for my fellowship, right? And I think for most of us in our fellowships, when we're doing the systemic work, is building those relationships, building the authentic relationships with our community partners, and even, the people that I would sue, which was a Medicaid waiver program here in Florida. I had great relationships with them, and I would call them and say, I'm going to sue you, but here's why. And I mean, just building that from day one are still things that I carry today. So I think those are two really incredible skills. I know people don't like the data collection piece, but I got to tell you, it's where it's at if you want to keep getting that funding and showing how you're changing lives.
Data drives so many different parts of community impact development, for sure. Aurora, how about you?
Yeah, I love data, Ericka. Gosh, I think that it was first of all, I should say that I think that my fellowship, when it was NAPLE, was actually, it was such a good fit for the organization that I was with. And it was the organization that had actually applied for the fellowship, and then I applied for the fellowship position. So I literally was just kind of like looking for something that was going to be a good fit after I was working with a judge for a year. And so I think that it was, again, a surprise. Equal Justice Works was a surprise. And being open to that, what I have taken away and still kind of carry on to this new position that was a consulting job, but now I'm actually co-director of, in addition to some client work with Pop-Up Justice, but I'm now co-director of Front and Centered, which is a statewide environmental justice group coalition. And so 20 plus years ago, when I was a fellow, I think the moment that I felt like this is a critical turning point in my career was at my first annual, I think it was in October, the annual get together for the fellowship. And it was then that I kind of had a sense of community, that and because of the community and saying, oh my gosh, there are so many of us here, and in having that sense of community of people who were risk takers, who were courageous, who were innovative, and hearing about all these different fellowship projects that used all the tools of advocacy, or were getting ready to use the tools of advocacy, to somebody who's going to be filing their first class action, to somebody who's going to be representing somebody in detention, to somebody who was going to put a brand new program all together to change the world. I thought, these are cool people, and actually those kinds of things were, like determination and courage and community building and innovation. All those things have stuck with me and were the things that allowed me to make the transition, to know to step down from the executive director position and take a risk and do this thing called Pop-Up Justice. Like, behind that curtain here in my basement is like not only my laundry, but my meditation room. So I've got a meditation room, and I had been kind of just reflecting upon my career, and also in 2016, and really thinking hard about, there's this other pull that had a little bit to do with data, Ericka, and it was a lot to do with innovation and wanting to do something really creative that had a social impact. And so, in my meditation room, that was when it's like, okay, put something together like Pop-Up Justice, and see what you get to do and work on the things that you want to do. And so fast forward to today, where I've been able to work on in helping to start up. It was a client, front and centered, to start up into a nonprofit. We are not a legal aid program, but we've had a very active engagement in the state legislative session where we're going up against big oil. We are engaged in advocacy. We are essentially making a difference on the debate about cap and trade in Washington state. We were successful in passing the Healthy Environment for All Act, where we're going to integrate environmental justice and equity principles across 12 state agencies. You know, so all of that, and having the audacity among all these different grassroots organizations across the state to think big and work with them. Those are the things that, you know, the values still kind of have allowed me to say, yeah, we can do this. You know, this is like a David and Goliath kind of experience, but yeah, we can do this. And those are the things that I think when I come back here, just really makes me just kind of think like it was yesterday. And in between Columbia Legal Services and Front and Centered, I have been able to explore these creative endeavors in a way where, yeah, well, let's launch the Social Justice Film Institute. Yeah, wrote a comic. Yeah, we're going to be working on Duwamish recognition that with a tribe that's been, you know, essentially overlooked, granted federal recognition and then rescinded federal recognition. So these are the things that, you know, fast forward 20 plus years later now, that it was at that moment in that banquet, always over food, where I felt this is a community that shares the kind of values that allow me to do the audacious things that everybody here and everybody in the audience is probably undertaking.
Absolutely, that community is so significant. Mary, were there any particular values or skills that left an impression with you as you began your career?
Oh, absolutely, so many. And I think that there are two that I want to highlight. And I see that David is on, and this is a big shout out to David because he's a master at this, and he taught us well, which is really the power of narrative in your life, right? Because every single time you're advocating for something, you're telling a story. And in some cases, you're telling someone else's story. Although, as we have gone forward with our career, we are learning more and more about how to engage the communities that we are working with to tell their own stories, which has been a huge sea change from my dinosaur days at the beginning. And I think that piece, David is very good at telling the story of the organization and the story of community. And I think that I learned a lot about how to tell the story of the change that we wanted to see. And I can remember I can actually have a vivid memory of doing my, at the time, NAPO application and kind of approaching it like I would put together a piece of legal writing, and then just kind of pushing that aside and talking about what is the story of kinship caregivers that we want to tell, you know, both in DC in the legal context, but in the United States about, you know, what power that these grandparents and others bring to the table. So I think that's one. And then I think, you know, the components of what entrepreneurship looks like, and just kind of piggybacking on what Aurora and Ericka said, in law school, I don't think that even now, even though law school has changed and the pedagogy of law school has changed, you're not always given explicit permission to think about, you know, crafting a career that meets your goals in your life, right? Like, what's going to bring you joy? All of these questions that from a law school perspective seem to be too touchy-feely and have no place, you know, standing aside the Socratic method. But I think that, you know, Equal Justice Works was the first place where people said, you know, what is the change you want to make? How does that mesh with what brings you joy? And, you know, where is that going to take you? And I think that's a really important space to be in. And when it happens early in your career, you're really blessed. You're really blessed with that, because a lot of people don't get that until they're well into their later years.
It really is a unique opportunity to have these careers we love. That being based in social justice, so the need, the demand for advocacy and investment is never ending. I'd like to ask each of you what you do to balance that self-care we were all taught to really value as Equal Justice Works Fellows. You know, you have to take care of yourself so you can help other people. If there are any particular strategies, or I know we talked about the meditation room Aurora has, anything that you do now to take care of you so you can help other people. So Ahilan, I'll start with you for this one.
Yeah, I alluded to this in the last question. It was very good advice. I remember getting, actually there was like a profane version of it, which I will not repeat here at one of the EJW conferences, but the sort of mild, PG version of it was like, do what you love, make sure you carve the time out to do, and I mean, when I was younger, that was soccer and singing, and no matter what, wherever I was, I tried to figure out some way to make that happen. Sometimes it involved doing crazy things that seemed totally irrational given the briefing deadlines and all that. But for the most part, not completely, but for the most part, I stuck with that. And even now, that's sort of largely true. I now have a 5-year-old daughter, and that definitely, I feel like she's a wonderful way of kind of, and it's involuntary, like whether you want it or not, like, there's, she takes you down different paths and does different things, and has made balance in some ways much easier. Juggling harder, but overall, like the balance and kind of happiness of my world has definitely been easier with that. But yeah, even the kind of midst of the most pressing stuff, I've always tried to find a way to carve those things out, never to leave them out for more than a few days at a time if possible. And that has been critical, absolutely critical, I think, for me.
Absolutely. Ericka, what are some of your balances that you use?
I definitely practice yoga very regularly. And that's something that I really picked up when I had my last child, and she's 9. So I credit a lot of just my Zen with a very regular yoga practice. And I now, for the first time in probably like a year and 3 months, I'm in regular therapy. And that has been so helpful, just to have like a regular session to talk about just kind of what's going on in life. And I really love to cook, and I love to travel when I can. I did tell some of the panelists at the beginning, I'm going on a yoga retreat in Costa Rica next month. I am extremely excited. I've never done a yoga retreat. We're going to be a really small group, but just those are the things that bring me passion and make me happy. But I would say the regular stuff is like the yoga and the therapy, and I never would have thought of either of them, and I definitely did not do any of them when I was a fellow or while I practiced law full time. I was too busy running and trying to fix things and help families, and which is again why we get to the part where I got burned out. So I do not recommend you doing that.
Well, I hope you have a great trip to Costa Rica. I'm excited for travel to start to be safe again for everybody. Andrew, what are some of your outlets or hobbies?
I like to play the drums, which is a great thing if you're angry. I have actually it's right next to me. It's my electronic drum set. I can stick some headphones on and just jam out. And yeah, when you're working on a huge issue like elder justice that just seems so insurmountable, you're gonna get angry. I mean, I get angry. That's just my personality. Sometimes I get angry at injustice and I want to fix it, and I can't always fix it, and I can't do everything, and I have to accept sometimes that I'm one person and I can't do it all. That's not to be fatalist. It's not to say that we can't try very, very hard and we have to do our part and we still have an obligation. But at the end of the day, you just have to let some stuff go and have a good hobby like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's right in your office too, it sounds like. That's a great location. Mary, how about you?
Yeah, I think I'm a classic work hard, play hard type of gal. And I really do take both of those things very seriously, almost always in the same day. So, I work really hard during the day. I like to go out with friends. I have 2 kids in college. I have a great husband. I have a questionably good dog. I'm looking at her right now. And I just think that, just trying to find, joy and laughter in your day as well is something that is a huge part of what I do, trying to find a sense of humor. with the work that we do because it normally is not very funny. But it's amazing the funny things you can find pretty much anywhere. So.
Find the humor in the world. Aurora, are there other strategies besides the meditation room, which I'm very jealous of? That's a great.
There's laundry and meditation. Laundry and meditation behind that curtain. But I mean, Mary's point about humor and everybody kind of finding an outlet that is just completely something different from your career, and it really allows you to kind of, you know, just decompress. And for me, I start out my day with meditation as well as, and, you know, I've kind of adapted and made up a whole bunch of things too, because that's what I do. But, you know, I have this booklet, like, and I've been doing this now for the last 10 years, which is, you know, I start each day with essentially writing in a journal that just says, you know, I just list, you know, what are the things I'm grateful for? 5 things. Big, small, medium, 5 things. Start your day, meditate, do a little laundry, and then, you know, maybe eat a little bit of this. This is also something that you need to do, which is, you know, chocolates. I always have a box of chocolates right there. Get you going and make you feel better when you're down. So
Instant happiness. Well, Lindy, I don't see any questions yet from the audience unless you have any that I've missed.
I see one in the questions box. It says, when you think about our alumni engagement program, what could Equal Justice Works do that would be valuable to our alums? And what is one thing you would have wanted to happen when you were a fellow?
Let's see. Mary, we haven't had you start a round yet, so I'll kick that one off with you.
I'm gonna pass and think about that one. Can you come back to me?
Sure. How
There's
about
a lot
Andrew?
to go, so I get a little bit more
That is
time.
the question. Absolutely. Andrew, how about you?
Yeah, you know, I was actually thinking about this the other day. I read an article about lots of corporations and their boards incorporating shadow boards for younger people who are getting into the business so that they can see how to run a corporation and they can get integrated as the future leaders. And we have a lot of nonprofit organizations that are sponsoring fellows, and we have a lot of national nonprofit organizations working on lots of issues that fellows are engaged in. You know, I've been looking myself for board opportunities and have found it a little difficult to get into. And I think that a shadow board for fellows and alums on the issues that they're doing in nonprofit organizations or advocacy organizations, facilitating those sorts of things so they can continue to be leaders, I think that would be a great thing.
Very valuable experience, and it is hard to find trainings on how to be a board member before you join as well. I guess I'll open this question up because I think everybody may have different things you'd like to discuss.
Yeah, I had sort of a milder version of that, which is just even, I don't remember us doing like a reunion as such, or, you know, after 3 years, 5 years, 10 years kind of thing. I think doing that for the organization, physically bringing everybody back in something separate from the conference probably was quite logistically daunting. But meaning the annual, you know, EGW. But I wonder in the world of Zoom if that's something that could be set up for classes. I think probably doing it now for our, you know, 20th year or whatever would be might be fun, but it wouldn't. But I think if you did it, you know, even starting now, having this year's class have it 3 years out and 5 years out and like that, it might facilitate the kind of development and maintenance of certain kinds of peer networks that otherwise might be a little bit harder to maintain.
Absolutely.
I thought of mine. It took me a minute, but I thought of mine, which is, you know, when you go to like a think tank website and you look, and I think, you know, for anybody who's been in the media and you want to get experts who want to talk about certain issues, and you can say, you know, who has expertise in immigration. And if you guys already have this and I've missed it, then forgive me. But, you know, often I have multiple clients, all of whom touch the child welfare system, but I need somebody quickly who knows immigration, for example. We're doing some work with child welfare agencies and the young people at the border. And if I could have kind of a database where I say immigration, and then I get, you know, the contact information for all of the fellows and all of the alums who are doing that, that would be incredibly helpful. Because I think that we're all in a place where, you know, there are issues that come up quickly, especially when you're in a policy context, and you really need to know who the experts are, and it would be great to be able to access that in a pretty accessible way.
Mhm.
Absolutely. It makes me think of the cohort breakouts we've had at LDT in the past, and you can meet people doing your topic across the country. Such a rare opportunity.
For sure.
Any other suggestions? Or Lindsay, I don't know if we have any other questions you've seen come through.
Okay, I've got another one. So what is your favorite memory or most memorable moment from your fellowship?
I'll make this an open forum. We can contribute as you are ready.
There were a lot of funny ones, for sure. And I definitely, you know, was very uncomfortable about, you know, going to essentially doing hearings every day. And so my supervisor was always really good about, no, you know, this is what I think. There are moments there just, Steve, I just need the answer. You know, I just need the answer right now because I got to go in right now. And he's like, well, this is what I think. And what do you think? And, you know, he was so great about that. And he always said that. It was like Groundhog Day every day like that. And it got to a point where I did feel so confident about, you know, these cases that there were a number of opposing counsel folks who, you know, would always try and kind of intimidate me. And there was a moment where I was like, well, if this guy Ralph in this kind of light blue tuxedo can, you know, make a motion like that, then I'm going to make a motion to win. And so it was just a series of these humorous moments where you kind of feel like it breaks up the stress. But that was definitely an example where just like, this is like the weirdest but funnest time that I feel like I'm growing. But it was the humor in those moments.
Great. We have another question that popped up. Most of you have supervised other fellows. What have you learned about supporting fellows during and after their fellowship? I don't know if any of you guys have directly supervised a fellow. Ericka, I know you said you helped to look at choosing fellows. Do you have particular values or skills you looked for when those applicants were coming through?
I would say definitely from the funder role, we wanted to see the outside of the box thinking from, you know, just the applications in general, because, you know, we had, you know, a pretty generous pool of applicants in Florida, and we had, you know, 4 to 5 that we could fund. And so I was really looking for the folks that were, you know, just thinking outside the box. But supervising them, it's really interesting. Even though we were funders, you know, we still did those touch-base calls with them, and we still provided them support throughout the term of their fellowship. And so we weren't obviously directly supervising them, but we got to field a lot of, this is going on, you know, how does this work? Should this be this way? Do you have any advice? And it was just about kind of remembering what it's like to be that new lawyer again. Like, I don't know about any of you, but I would copy my boss on every single email that I sent out until she finally said, could you stop? You don't need me. You're fine. You're doing great. And then I stopped. So it's just about providing support and meeting people where they are. And so there were just certain things that were really nerve-wracking, and just continuing to encourage and support and provide resources and feedback, and just nudging, not too much, but nudging just enough to say, you got this. And so that's kind of how we supported our fellows, even in kind of a different capacity. As a funder, we wanted them to succeed, right? We put money on the table because we believed in you and knew you could succeed. And so we want you to succeed.
Yeah, I was fortunate to supervise, I think 3 or 4, directly supervise, I think 3, and then, you know, other people in the ACLU who ended up working very closely on my cases. So I was sort of functionally half supervising them or something. And there's a lot of things. And I think this came out of the original guidance, like have a weekly meeting at least, even if you're popping with each other every day and talking constantly, still have that meeting where the purpose of it is not to talk about your work, but to talk about kind of the meta, you know, how the fellowship is going and all that. That's really, it's such a simple advice, but it's so easy to lose it in the barrage of work that's coming. And I think that's really, really important. I found that giving people a sense of ownership was really important. And like Ericka, you're saying, they sort of simultaneously want to make sure that they're not messing anything up, and so they want you to see every single thing that they're doing. But also, you can't learn to grow until you take the kind of leap of faith that comes with doing some things entirely on your own. There's something about that kind of changes you as a person, as a lawyer. So kind of giving them the space, even if it kind of messes up the docket sometimes, like it's not maybe the perfect case that we would have wanted to do, may not even be entirely within the project description, but if it gives them an opportunity to give them autonomy and ownership over something, then you make the space to do that, because in the long term, it builds them and makes them better, and better whether they stay in your organization or go to a different one. It builds the capacity of the movement. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of things like this, but I think just to echo what Ericka said, like trying really hard to remember what it was like when you were in that spot and really being conscious of that. How much validation you need. I mean, you get used to supervising people who are 4 or 5 years out. It's a completely different animal, and the level of engagement and the nature of it is fundamentally different. You have to keep that in mind. I noticed that afterward, everybody's younger than me. They all look the same. Like, somebody could be 4 years out, 2 years out. I'm like, they're all just like, is there, you don't even remember, like, and it's like, it's so different. It's so different each year as you kind of grow and develop. And so you have to keep that in your mind.
Yeah, I think that, just the importance, this is going to sound like a very earthy, crunchy thing to say, but the importance of gratitude, you never get enough of it. I think that everybody always wants that validation. They always want that positive reinforcement. And whether you're externally driven, whether you're a people pleaser, whether you're kind of, you keep your head down and, you have internal goals that you're meeting, just being grateful for the effort that people put out there is extraordinarily important. And I've seen it with people who are, nationally recognized, and they get positive reinforcement, and it just changes their demeanor, it changes their day, and it's so often overlooked. And I think that, if you can keep that in mind and be disciplined about giving that positive reinforcement, authentically felt, but that's huge, not just for the people that you're supervising, but also for your partners and, even for your mentors.
Maybe one final question to wrap everything up. I know a lot of our alumni want to continue to stay involved with public interest law, both in their career and outside of their career. Do any of you have any recommendations on how to do that? Regardless of what your full-time job may be, other opportunities to stay involved. Maybe a small plug here. I know, Linby, we have often been looking for alumni volunteers to help with application reviews. I believe that'll be coming up this fall. I know I've done that a couple times. Have any of you helped review the? See Ericka nodding.
Yes. And I can get back on the list now.
I always find that to be such an inspiring, it's been 10 years since my fellowship. It reminds me of my original excitement and inspiration to get involved with public interest law. Kind of gets you excited again.
I think there are also other opportunities regardless of what you do. I mean, if you decide to go the firm route, obviously most firms have pro bono opportunities. I think that there are amazing ways to be on boards of local legal services organizations. And even though I don't practice, conventional law anymore, I'm on the board of a couple of legal services organizations. I think those, finding ways in which you can continue to give back, you can become a CASA volunteer, you could become a GAL. There are, truly dozens of ways that you can kind of stay involved in that. And I also would really recommend teaching. I think that most law schools, rely heavily on adjunct professors, and there's always a class in you. You just have to figure out what it is and help it come out. But that's an incredible way that you can be involved in the community, in the legal community, but also, have the benefits of seeing your students succeed over years and, have them become colleagues is really satisfying as well.
Absolutely. Any other pearls of wisdom before we wrap up for today? Thank you all so much for your time today. I have been reminded of what I feel is our shared passion and advocacy and inspiration to help our communities in all these different ways. Just a reminder that we have later this afternoon our webinar on Gregg versus Georgia. And then tomorrow afternoon, we have our alumni social. Lindsay, am I missing any other upcoming events?
Just one more in between tonight's event and tomorrow's social. I know you're all excited to try those Naples-tinis. I'm going to keep saying that. But we also have our session on navigating social identity tomorrow as well. So that's at 3 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. And our next conversation, as Megan mentioned, is at 5 o'clock. So hopefully we'll see you all soon. And we just want to say a huge thank you to you, Megan, and all of our panelists. It's been so great to hear all of you across generations, across programs, and to hear all of your insight. And we so look forward to seeing you around more and putting together some great opportunities for you all to connect on a larger scale with the alumni. So I love that reunion idea. We might have to give you a call, Ahilan, so that we can get you on board with that. So thank you all for coming. And it was so nice to reconnect with all of you here.
Thank you all for having me.
Thanks so much, guys.
Take care.
Have a great day.